birthday party on the free winds. Mark Headley reported the cost at about $400,000. So David Miscavige wanted to throw Tom a birthday party. Stacey Francis sang at the birthday party. You were in the band. What was the whole? What went down at the birthday party?
Well, I'll tell you, it was a surprise for him because I'll give you an example. At the time, we used a public drummer. It was a guy who's fabulous at the drums because we couldn't use our own drummer. He had a condition where he couldn't come to that gig. It was considered to be PTS. Okay. So we used this public drummer, and then I was told, hey, we're going to put on a birthday party. This guy flew home because he performed with us the week before, which was a week of a maiden voyage. I called him. He had just landed in Los Angeles, and I said, Tommy, you got to come back. He says, are you joking? I says, no, and I can't even tell you why you have to come back, but you got to come back right now, and we have a plane ticket ready for you to turn around. He trusted me that much that he just turned around, came back, and then when he got back, I told him, listen, we're putting on a birthday party for Tom Cruise. And I remember telling Stacey Francis that she's going to sing at this birthday party, and she was completely knocked out. I mean, this was like she just died and went to heaven. You know?
I bet, yeah.
So all those preps went, I don't know what the cost was. Mark would know better than I would, but as far as picking the numbers, that entire set of music was worked out so it would be the most pleasurable moments for Tom Cruise. And he walked in a room, and the band started playing, and he was just floored. And he sat up front, and I remember looking at him, and he jumped up on the stage and started singing with Stacey at one point. So I don't know what to say. I mean, this is you don't ever have things like this happen every day. But he was knocked out, and it was a fabulous success. I do remember that.
And so David Miscavige was quite pleased with it.
He was knocked out with it. You could just see him up front that he was at his best, and he wanted to present this with Tom as a birthday gift. And Tom, I think at one point mentioned it was the nicest birthday gift he had ever gotten in his life.
Wow! So a lot of things.
By the way, as a little aside, Katie Holmes, right?
Yep.
Prior to this, she wanted to record a song and present this as on a CD to Tom. And David got me to go to L.A., the Mad Hatter studio, and produce her singing this song.
Wow.
And I did that. And Katie came in, and she went in the studio and started singing it. And she came back and we listened to it, and she says, Jesus Christ, man, this doesn't sound good. And I said, Katie, here's what I want you to do. Don't hold on to the notes. This is what Frank Sinatra started doing when he got older. It's what Tony Bennett has done. Hit the note and get off it, because if you're not singing on a daily basis and you're not trained, if you hold on to the note, it'll show those little frailties in hitting the note that you have in your voice. She went back out in the studio, did it, and it come off like $1 million.
Ron, how is Katie Holmes' singing voice? Does she sound great?
She sounded incredible. She was real good, and she was a delightful person, just really a nice individual. You know, you meet people who are nice individuals, you know they're not faking it. As an individual, she's genuinely a very nice individual. When I say that, you've met people who are trying to be nice, and you can see right through the facade.
Sure.
She wasn't trying to be that way. That's the way she was.
Oh, that's a great thing to say.
The time we spent in the studio was delightful, and she took the little bit of a change I had her do. It wasn't much, so I'm not taking credit for her doing a great job, because she has a very nice singing voice. But that little thing, like if you were to sing something like, I've got you under my skin, if I held on to the note, you'd hear little frailties in my voice, because I'm not a professional singer. And this is what Frank Sinatra did as he got older. And if you listen to some of the recordings, that's how he kept that style up. He changed his style to that, and it came off great. And that's what Katie did. And we had a delightful time. She sang on the show, and she came out and sang the song that was on the CD, and it came off just as good. It was great time.
We know the number one rule in any kind of business or corporate life or any kind of life is to make the boss look good. So it sounded like you made the boss look good.
We made him look incredible. Tom just absolutely was knocked out.
Now, what I would add to that, from my perspective, as the author of the Scientology Money Project, that's ScientologyMoneyProject.com, that would be called an excessive benefit. If you're running a tax-exempt religion, you can't give excessive benefits to one person. So these are disallowed. This is one reason I focus in on Scientology's tax exemption. You can't give a $400,000 birthday party because it doesn't have a public benefit.
Well, no, it didn't have a public benefit, and I don't know if it cost that much, but if Mark Headley said it did, he would know because he was in charge of. Well, he had a high executive post in the church, you know that. Although they're saying he was no good from the beginning, that's bullshit. They're the one who put him in the post.
Well,
he was very capable as an individual. He could get things done.
Ron, I'm glad you said that. You know, because you take these executives in the church who leave, and then once they leave, they were nobodies. So you have Marty Rathbun, who was number 2 man, Inspector General, Religious Technology Center. I mean, that's second only to Chairman of the Board, RTC. And then you have Mike Rinder, who was in charge of Office of Special Affairs. Once they left, the church was saying they were, low-ranking nobodies. But it's interesting how you can be, in the words of Frank Sinatra, riding high in April, shot down in May, so to speak. So you can be a church executive, high and mighty one day, and the next day you're a bitter, defrocked apostate and the worst person in the world.
Yeah.
And no, Mark put that event together. Look, I know Mark and Claire. Terrific people, tremendously professional. Mark is very skilled at what he does. With sound systems. Yeah, and so that's why we people like you and I, Tony Ortega, my wife Karen, everyone else, works to expose the Church of Scientology for what it is and to counteract the lies it constantly puts out. Now, going back to Sea Org, at Gold Base, before the show, you mentioned, and I was surprised by this, you worked a lot of overnighters, but one time you said you and Peter Schless stayed up for 82 hours straight. What happened?
Yes.
How do you even do that?
Well, I'll tell you something. I don't know how we did it, but we did it. And we were doing a theme for St. Hill. And this started with Peter and I working out the theme itself. It was going to go on a video. It went like this. Da 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 do 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 do. That was the theme. Just that little snippet I just sang for you.
Mm-hmm.
And working out the theme, the rhythm section, having people go in the studio, record this, and make this last. And it broke into When the Saints Come Marching In the last part of it. I remember that. This was about a 9-minute video, and it went from dead stop where we were standing at the starting line to 82 hours later, we had a mixed piece of music. And I know that it was 82 hours because I remember when we started and I looked at my watch and I said, Peter, we've been up for 82 hours. Now, I don't mean that we slept for a couple hours here or there or nodded off, because I would keep him awake, he would keep me awake. And we were up for 82 hours straight, and we finished this thing. And, of course, we went to bed and we felt we were great because we did this. Let me tell you something. That greatness is mixed in with a touch of insanity, because to work for 82 hours, you just can't do that. Well, we did it, though.
Yeah, that's insane to do, but you do what you have to. The longest I've stayed up is 48 hours.
Yeah.
49 hours, and that was birth of my first child, and there were some complications and things. And I got to tell you, at about 45, 46 hours, I felt like I was starting to hallucinate and see things.
You do feel that thing.
And I slept, I don't know, 16 hours. How long did you sleep for after that stretch of?
I don't know, maybe about 10 or 12 hours. But I'm going to tell you something. On retrospect, now that I'm talking about this, and I haven't thought about this before, probably what kept us going was the fact that we're working on an artistic project. If we were working out the design for a building, or maybe working out how to put some electrical circuit together in a piece of audio gear, I don't know if we could have done it. But the mere fact that we had to keep on creating and creating this project, and it was music and it was a piece of art, I think that's what was the fuel that kept us going.
Well, sure, because you're artists and you would do that. Ron, I used to have to stay up long hours on tests. We'd be testing like a new laser system at work or something, and it was just easier to stay up 24 or 30 hours to just run the test and get it done.
Yeah.
But it was drudgery, so we would smoke cigars and drink coffee. You get the term wired. You would just get wired, and kind of like by like at 24 hours, you're just tired, but you want to finish the test, and there has to be data, and it wasn't fun like that. It wasn't play. It wasn't composing. So,
no.
But it shows the work ethic that Sea Org builds into people, and people who leave the Sea Org have one hell of a work ethic. I'll tell you that. My wife Karen can work like nobody's business.
Let me give another little example. We redid the studio several times, okay? And the one time we were redoing it, we had to cut off all the power in the studio itself. And there were two people, I'll just name them Luigi and Bruce. They're laying on the floor and talking about some component and some wiring that they had to work out. I had a flashlight. It was the only light we had in there. And I would shine it on Bruce, and he was awake, and he'd say, well, now, Luigi, how about such and such? And Luigi was sleeping. I'd wake him up, and he'd say, well, Bruce, what I would do, and Bruce would go to sleep immediately. This is nuts. That's how it went.
Well, Ron,
one guy would start talking, the other guy was sleeping. He'd go to sleep, and the other guy'd start talking.
Ron, people in Sea Org would fall asleep. They would just fall asleep from exhaustion.
Yeah. Well, that's what it was. They had already been up probably about 24 or 48 hours, and it was just a grind. I mean, literally a grind.
Sure. I remember trips that I would make to Europe, and you long story short, when you travel internationally, you go to Amsterdam or wherever. Sometimes you're up 24 hours because of flight delays, weather, transfers, whatever. And out here, outside of Scientology, that's exceptions to life, because most nights you get 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
And but in Sea Org, you don't get 8 hours of sleep.
Nope.
And in fact, you developed a medical condition, and that was the only way you were able to change your sleep schedule. What happened with your health?
Well, what happened is one day I had heart palpitations. I don't know, maybe it was like 12 or 13 hours straight. And I went to the medical liaison officer, and I said, listen, we got to do something, because this has me, man. I'm worried about it. So she sent me to see, I went to see Dr. Denk, and a lot of people in the audience would know who he was. And he put on me what's called a Holter monitor, which is a recording device. You hooked up with like little EKG patches on your chest, and you wear this for 24 hours straight, or maybe it was 2 days straight, whatever. At the end of that, you take it in, and they listen to what's on the tape. And at night, sometimes my heart would go up to 138 beats a minute while I was sleeping. So he basically said, listen, you have a condition here that you just can't avoid doing something about. It's not dangerous, but you can't avoid it, because whatever you're doing to cause this, you got to back off on. And what it was I was smoking too many cigarettes and drinking too much coffee, but I think it was an inherent weakness in my genetic structure of my heart itself. So I did that, and that kind of handled it. And one of the things he told me is you got to get more sleep. You just can't be doing these overnighters. So because of that, I was allowed to get a couple hours of sleep extra a night.
Yeah, and that's so important. And sleep deprivation is physically harmful. In the Geneva Convention, the rules of war, it's considered a war crime to deprive people of sleep.
Yeah.
And the church is guilty of a lot of inhumanity and abuse that if this were a war, they would be charged, with war crimes, and I'm not overstating that. The isolation, the abuse, the psychological duress of security checks. For new-time listeners, I just wanted to add a note to your story about Dr. Denk, his importance to Scientology. Dr. Gene Denk, the late Dr. Gene Denk, was L. Ron Hubbard's personal physician. He was the doctor that prescribed Vistaril, the psychiatric tranquilizer, for L. Ron Hubbard after he had a stroke. And Dr. Denk signed off on the death certificate for Mr. Hubbard. So, he was the man as far as, medical authority goes. He helped L. Ron Hubbard write the book all about radiation, in which became the basis for the later purification rundown. So he's an important guy, and, Sea Org members were routinely sent to Dr. Denk. Now, people at the base would get sick.
Right.
And when they got sick, people get sick, right? When they got sick, did Scientology pay for them to see a doctor, or did they send to the county for free medical, or what happened when Sea Org members got sick?
Well, if you, let's say, had a routine physical exam that you had to do, you were probably sent to Megan Shields, and as far as I know, the medical liaison officer would pay for that. But if you had something major happen, it would be worked out that it would get paid for under workers' compensation. That's how that works. But listen, you'd go to see a doctor, you'd be driven there by somebody else, so you wouldn't go there in a car by yourself, so you couldn't escape. This is unbelievable stuff to a person who hasn't experienced it, but this is what went on.
Ron, what is the focus? This is a thing that recurs over and over in Sea Org. You can't be left alone because you might escape. And so...
Well, there's a good goddamn reason you want to escape. Who the hell wants to live that way?
No kidding. But and this is one thing I want the public to know, that Scientology does not... It has to keep Sea Org members as prisoners by actually having them guarded or escorted or traveling in teams. When I go down to Sunset in Vermont, I go down there to my bank, right by Pacific Base, Big Blue, the complex, whatever you want to call it, and I see the body routers out on the street. They're always in groups of 2. There's usually like 5, though. The other day I saw 5. They were hovering around like salesmen at a used car lot, right? They were waiting for people to walk up. And I was there at the traffic light watching them, thinking, look at the situation. They could run away because they're out on the street. In fact, it's right by the subway. They could just run down onto the subway. What keeps them from running down into the subway, Ron? And just escape? Yeah. Why don't the Sea Org body routers on Sunset in Vermont here in Hollywood, right at the subway station, what is keeping them from running down onto the subway and just getting lost into the city?
Well, first of all, what would they do? Would they leave with no money, sleep on a park bench maybe, or if they didn't have a relative they could go to, what the hell could they do for themselves? And you got to remember this. What's really pounded home is that the only reason that a person would leave is because they have harmful acts they've committed against that organization or person they're trying to separate themselves out from. And this is held its own mind as, I don't know how I can live this way. I wonder what I'm not letting myself in on it. What did I do to start thinking this way? And it's a lie. You can become victimized of another person. And it isn't like anybody who wants to leave only has bad things they've committed or what you call overts against that. Things could get that bad that life becomes intolerable. But if they left, what money would they have to at least get a little start in their life?
That's a good point. So,
factor.
Because
at least they'd get meals, they have a place to sleep, and they may think about it quite a bit. But to actually pull that off and say, hey, I'm the hell out of here, that's another story.
Yeah, and to some extent they're prisoners in their own mind, but you're right, they don't have any money, they don't have any place to stay, they may not
but
even
hang
have...
on, wait.
Yeah.
Not to some degree. To the great degree, they are prisoners of their own mind, and that's what keeps them there. And I'll tell you, if anybody's read my book, I describe how you build this prison in your own mind. You build your own prison, and you live in it, and it's done a little bit at a time.
And that's well said. And one thing I wanted to ask you about, again, questions from listeners. When somebody escapes from the Sea Org, it's called blowing. They blew.
Right.
Now, when you were at Gold Base, they had blow drills, practice on what to do in case someone escaped.
Oh yeah.
Now, what would you do in a blow drill? In a practice, is it, did you have to lock doors, make telephone calls? What goes on in a blow drill?
Well, you wouldn't lock doors, because if somebody blew, the horse has left the barn. It's ridiculous to close the barn doors. But you would be, let's say there was a group of people that had cars. They would be assigned to go to certain places, to bus stations, or maybe a railroad station, and see if a person's hanging out there, or maybe go to a relative's house or a friend's house, and you'd try to track down every possibility where the person may have gone. And this is how it's done. And they check if the person had a credit card. They have a way to check if he spent any money and used his credit card, and that would be a lead for you to go on. If a person had a cell phone and he stupidly kept it with himself, you could track down where he is just with his cell phone. But this was a very well planned out drill, and it was called a blow drill. All right.
So the goal in Sea Org is, if someone escapes, is to retrieve them, not let them have their own free will, but to kidnap them back, take them back, convince, persuade,
yes, and
threaten them.
Here's the kicker, and this is, now look, you want to come back because you want to leave the proper way. You want to do the routing out. My friend, that is complete horse manure. There was a guy on the base that routed out properly. I'll just call him Alexander. It took him 4 years to route out. 4 years, okay?
Jeez.
No, if you want to leave, you just leave. It's done. Then you pay the consequences, like if you have no money or you have no place to go. Okay, well, you contend with that. But that would be the price of your freedom, to contend with those things if you were to leave. And if you're not willing to put up with that or contend with that, well, you're going to stay.
Yeah, and part of routing out, leaving the Sea Org by the official way, for listeners who don't know, involves sec checks. You get a lot of sec checking, interrogation.
That's all it is. That's all you get.
And Ron, what's funny, this is the rumor line, okay? This is unsubstantiated, but, I've got pretty good sources. Routing out right now is taking longer than ever in the Church of Scientology because there's not enough auditors to do sec checking for the amount of people who want to leave.
Yeah.
So,
I would do that.
Anyway, that's what I've heard from my sources in LA and Clearwater. Now, so
yeah.
one question I asked you before the show, which was interesting, did anyone ever die at Gold Base? And you said no. Not to your knowledge.
Right.
So 2 questions. Any broker who took care of L. Ron Hubbard in the last years of his life, after Mr. Hubbard died, Annie went back to the base, to Gold Base, and then she developed lung cancer, correct?
Yes.
So what did they do with Annie when it was clear that she was terminal?
Well, she was sent to L.A. and she had a handler. In other words, she had somebody who would personally take care of her. And also she was put onto solo nuts. And it was deemed that at that level, if she audited that, she could handle the cancer.
Now, for our listeners, Ron, who don't know, what is solo knots? This is very specific.
Okay, this is NED for OTs, okay? And what it does is you handle body thetans that are stuck to your body or in your vicinity, and by ridding yourself of these entities, these entities who aren't up to the level of running their own body, so they live on your body, like a flea on a dog, okay?
Okay.
That's what she was put on. And, of course, I found out about her death quite accidentally, and I tell about this in the book because I got a Kindle one time as a present from David, and on that Kindle there's a 5-way switch that you can push it up, down, left, right, or in. And if you're looking up a ward, you find the list of wards, select it, and then press it to the right, which says look up in the dictionary. I pressed it twice, and it went to Google. And I was on the internet without a filter.
Oh, boy.
That's how I found out about Annie Tidman dying in L.A., and nobody at the base was told this. And as a matter of fact, just a little incident that happened shortly after that, I was out going to the laundry building. I remembered where I was, and one of the girls there, one of the executives said, "Ronnie, do you want to chip in? We're buying Annie some birthday presents." And I says, "I'll pass on it." And whether they knew about it and were duped just like the rest of the base, I don't know, or whether if they didn't know about it, they were in the same position as most people on the base, or even if they did, it would be just to keep the ruse up that she was still alive. I don't know which it was, but I remember I already knew that she died.
That is really something. And then when Stacy Moxon died, and people, look, listeners can Google this, Stacy Moxon, Moxon. She was electrocuted to death at the base.